Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnanatirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeyam Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sahajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nidhi Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our Friday program. So we are concluding which chapter? 13. Lucky number 13. Now what is the title of the chapter? Nature, the enjoyer, and consciousness. So we've learned a lot of different topics in this chapter. So Arjuna opened this chapter with some questions. He wanted to know about these 8 topics. He says, I want to know about nature, prakriti, purusha, the enjoyer, the field, the knower of the field, its knowledge and object of knowledge. So these things Krishna has been discussing in great detail in this chapter. And we said this chapter 13, it sets the foundation for the remainder of the chapters 14 through 17 in the Bhagavad Gita, which comprise of this Jnana Yoga section. And this somewhat technical chapter, it establishes some very important principles. And Krishna is going to kind of summarize those in this last verse. And Srila Prabhupada, as he often does, provides a wonderful summary of this chapter in its purport. So that is what we'll discuss this week. Last week, we talked a little bit about the spirit soul. And we talked about it, though it being conditioned in the material world, it has certain features. So anybody remember what is the nature of the spirit soul in relation to our discussion last week?
It's eternal.
It's eternal, yeah. And
it is never contaminated.
It is never contaminated. So it's always pure. So, because we know Krishna himself is never contaminated. He says he's never influenced by the modes, nor did he ever come in contact with the modes. Right? So, in that way, if we are part and parcel of Krishna, then the spirit soul must also have that same characteristic. So when we talk about these very illustrious and glorious qualities of pure devotion, these great transcendental emotions that emanate when one is chanting the holy names of the Lord, the great vision the pure devotee has of those around, the tolerance, the humility, all these things, we sometimes think, oh, not for me, or I'll never get that, that's too high, I'm too fallen. Anybody's ever said that or felt that? But actually, we know this nature of the soul, the spirit soul, are those pure qualities. And that soul is sitting right here, uncontaminated. It is still in this pure state. And Prabhupada gave the example last week of air when it's in mud. Right? Air still remains air, even though it's encircled in mud. So similarly, the spirit soul, it is pure. And it is residing here in its pure state. And it's not contaminated. So simply, we have to do something to awaken it. So what is preventing or what is blocking our experience in this pure state?
Conditioning.
Conditioning. And where does the conditioning sit?
Ego.
Ego. That's the first conditioning, right? False ego, specifically. Right? So that false ego, we said, it covers the soul. And so the process of devotional service, most potently through chanting of the holy names, we are chiseling away at that ego. But chiseling away at something to revive what is already there is very comforting. I may not be able to, create a beautiful painting. Right? I'm not talented enough to create some beautiful painting. But if you give a painting we can't see and say, it's there, you just have to remove the dust. What's that? I can do that. I can do that, right? I don't have to create the pure. So when we speak about the purity of devotional service and all these amazing things, remember, all we have to do is clear the dust. Because all those things are residing already within all of us in a dormant state. And so it should give us great confidence and hope when Krishna says that the soul has remained pure. Yes, though it's been within the condition by the material world for so many lifetimes, millions of lifetimes, it has not been touched in any even smallest fraction of the way by material nature. So, just as we will be enthused that I can remove the dust of a beautiful painting, we should have great confidence that by the right process of removing the dust of the heart, we can revive this original consciousness. And of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told us, Chaito Darpada Marjanam. By chanting the holy names of the Lord, we cleanse the mirror of the heart. Okay? So that is what you're doing. Just chanting. We don't have to worry about developing all these great. Just chant, and they'll automatically manifest because they're already there. They're just hidden. So let us read verse 35, and we'll conclude this chapter.
Can I
Yes, ma'am.
translation, please? Those who see with eyes of knowledge the difference between the body and the knower of the body, and can also understand the process of liberation from bondage in material nature, attain to the supreme goal.
Purport?
The purport of this 13th chapter is that one should know the distinction between the body, the unlovely body, and the super soul. One should recognize the process of liberation as described in the verses 8 through 12, and one can go on to the supreme destination. A faithful person should at first have some good association to hear of God, and this gradually become enlightened. If one accepts the spiritual master, one can learn to distinguish between matter and spirit, and that becomes the stepping stone for further spiritual realization. A spiritual master, by various instructions, teaches his students to get free from the material conception of life. For instance, in Bhagavad Gita, we find Krishna instructing Arjuna to free him from materialistic considerations. One can understand that this is matter, but it can be analyzed with its 24 elements. The body is the gross manifestation, and the subtle manifestation is the mind and psychological effects. And the symptoms of life are the interaction of the features. But over and above this, there is the soul, and there is also the super soul. The soul and the super soul are two. The material world is working by the conjunction of the soul and the 24 material elements. One who can see the constitution of the whole material manifestation as this combination of the soul and material elements can also see the situation of the super soul becomes eligible for transfer to the spiritual world. These things are meant for contemplation and for realization, and one should have a complete understanding of this chapter with the help of a spiritual master.
Okay, so let's unpack this verse and purport. So, as Prabhupada ends often with the most important point, how are we going to come to this understanding? With the help of the spiritual master. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanam Chaksu Gamine Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. It is Guru who has opened our eyes with the torch of knowledge. So it is the complete understanding of this can only be had with the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. Otherwise, it cannot be had. Right? So, what is the specific knowledge that Krishna has given in this chapter? So, Prabhupada opens, there's basically three things that constitute perfect knowledge. And what are those three things that constitute perfect knowledge?
The distinction between the body, the owner of the body, and the super soul.
So, the distinction between the body, the owner of the body, and the super soul. So, what's the body? What is the body?
Material matter.
Material matter. This is the body, right? We know that we identify with it, that we see very clearly. So what term does Krishna use to describe the body? The quiz time now.
The field.
The field. And what was it? Many remember the Sanskrit term? Extraseminal. Kshetra. Kshetra, right? So Kshetra means field. And why does Krishna use the word field of activities to describe the body?
It is a place where you can till that field and you can do the activities which would be good or bad, depending upon what.
Yeah? So a field produces what?
Crops.
Crops. Fruits, vegetable, right? Results. So similarly, the body is used to create various material results. Okay? So Krishna said this is a field, a kshetra. But separate from the field, there is a kshetragya. There's an owner. And what is that owner?
Krishna.
Well, in this context, the owner of the field, you're right, the ultimate owner is Krishna, but the intermediate resident within this body is the soul, the jiva. Right? So just as the farmer, when he's cultivating the field, he doesn't confuse that I am this field. He says this field is mine, and I'm cultivating it to generate certain results. So just like that, the spirit soul lives within this body, utilizing the body to perform various activities. So one has to understand that I am not this body. That's something we've never heard before, no? We haven't heard I'm not this body? No? First time? Right? So we hear that every time. First time we've attended a Bhagavad Gita class, we hear I'm not this body. So, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, repetition is only for our purpose to come to the conclusion, just as it's so obvious that the farmer doesn't think he's the field, it should be that obvious to us that I am not this body. And until then, we should keep hearing over and over and over again, I'm not this body, I'm spirit soul, until it is fully realized. That is knowledge. Knowledge is value when it's realized. If I know what 2 plus 2 is, but when the exam comes and I write 5, do I have actual realized knowledge? No. So, don't do that. Okay, so is that sufficient? I know everything then? I know my body and I know the soul. Is that complete knowledge? What else do I need to know?
The super soul.
The super soul. Who is the super soul?
Krishna.
Krishna. And what is we heard a lot in this chapter about the super soul, right? So what are some things that we understood about the super soul? Maybe how it is similar or how it is different than the jiva, the spirit soul. So what do we know about the super soul?
Super soul is all pervading.
What does that mean?
It's present everywhere. Whereas the jiva is
It's everywhere, so it's around the corner.
big.
It's high in the tree. It's everywhere. Can we define everywhere? Prabhupada gives this statement that's not really, it's in Srimad Bhagavatam. How can we describe in some scientific detail that where is the super soul present in everywhere?
Every atom.
Thank you. Every atom. Even the inanimate items. Paramatma. So that becomes, wow, perplexing. But that's to give us a context for the all-pervasive presence of the super soul, right? So, okay, so that's one feature. And how does that compare to the jiva?
Jiva resides only in its own body, limited. That too, we don't have a control, we don't decide it.
So I have consciousness of my body, right? But even consciousness of my body, do I have complete consciousness of my body? Arjun, do you know what's going on in your left toe right now?
No.
We don't know, right? We don't even know in full what's happening in our own body. So I have I can feel my left toe if I pinch it, ouch, but that's the extent of my consciousness. I don't actually fully understand, right? So our knowledge is still very limited, but it's present within. Right? Whenever the toe is pinched and someone doesn't say ouch, we know the soul is left the body. And there's no consciousness. But the consciousness is limited, so that is one feature. What else do we know about the super soul?
He is the ultimate owner.
He is the ultimate owner. And why is he the ultimate owner?
He is, because he created everything.
He created everything. He provided everything. Even our bodies. Right? They say, no, it came from nature. But who created nature? You know, we have water and it's made up of hydrogen and oxygen. But where the hydrogen and oxygen came from? Someone ultimately had to equip the materials, right? And that is Krishna. So that makes him the rightful owner. So that is his position. What else does the super soul do?
ultimate enjoyer.
So what is the primary reason we came to the material world?
To enjoy without.
Separately.
Huh?
Wanted to enjoy separately.
Separate from who?
Krishna.
We wanted to enjoy separate from Krishna. So we forgot, or in defiance or challenging one fact. And what fact were we challenging?
He's the supreme enjoyer.
That Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. Right? And what makes him the supreme enjoyer? Why is Krishna the supreme enjoyer?
Because he created everything.
Because he created everything. He is the source of everything. That makes him the proprietor. The proprietor can then be the enjoyer. Just like in a relative term, if a rich person owns a house, the person who owns a house can be the enjoyer of those facilities. If we as a guest go visit that person in their home, we can enjoy those facilities, but only to the extent that the owner allows us to. If the owner says go home, what do we have to do? Go home. So our enjoyment is there, but it's dependent. I cannot independently enjoy that person's home. Right? I can't enjoy that home without cooperation with the owner. Pretty logical? Fair? What about this giant home of the earth? Who's the owner? Krishna. So then, can I enjoy it without the cooperation of Krishna? No. I can pretend to. And if I do, then there will be the different consequences. And that is why Krishna, starting in the next chapter, is going to speak about the modes of nature and how they bewilder one, condition one to try to enjoy this material world separate from Krishna, and what the result is of those activities. Right? But because Krishna is the source of everything, the creator, that makes him the proprietor, and thus it makes him the enjoyer. So that is why nature, the enjoyer, and consciousness. Consciousness is a living entity. Enjoyer is understanding our position. So as soon as we try and want to become the independent enjoyer, we are stuck in the material world. So we must understand that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. But does he actually enjoy more than anyone else? Is there someone who enjoys more than Krishna?
Yes.
Who?
Devotees. Radharani.
His pure devotees. They actually enjoy more than Krishna. Because Krishna, as the supreme owner, actually to his pure devotees, he gives himself to his devotees. He sells himself. Whatever you want is yours, is you enjoy. And they enjoy more. And we've actually experienced this. Continue the example of the house. Rich person, rich man and woman. And they have some function at their house. Who enjoys that function? The guests. And who does the work? Huh? The host. So who's the enjoyer? Huh?
Devotees.
That's the same thing. So the devotees enjoy serving and loving Krishna. And Krishna enjoys serving his devotees and loving his devotees. It's a beautiful two-way street. And the winner in that transaction is always the devotee. Because whatever we can give to Krishna, Krishna can give in many, many million times more. Unlimited times more. He is unlimited. Right? So it's just about knowing how to enjoy. That is what makes it critical. So Krishna establishes something very important. So knowing I am spirit, soul, not this body, it's not sufficient, right? I need to know Krishna. But I need to know something specific about between me and Krishna. And what do I need to know? Relationship. So in the 13th verse, I was just looking back to confirm which one. It says that Brahman, the spirit, beginningless and subordinate to me. So what is our position to Krishna? Subordinate. Which means our eternal relationship is of? What's our eternal activity with Krishna? Service. He is the master, we are the servant. Now in the material world, that always leads to our, frustration and our, displacement. But in the spiritual world, that actually leads to the greatest of success. Right? So when one understands, again, body, the owner, and the soul, super soul, and all of its relations. I need to know I am not this body, I'm spirit, soul, the relationship between me and the body, and the relationship between me and Krishna. So if I understand that, then one has complete and perfect knowledge. Why is it perfect and complete? I say, wait a minute, there's so many things. I go to the library and there are books and books and books and books and so many different topics. So how can we say just knowing these few things is perfect and complete knowledge?
Everything is encompassed within these three things.
Okay, so everything is encompassed within it. But nuclear physics may not be encompassed within it.
That is again a part of the external material energy of Krishna.
Okay. So how can I say then that this knowledge is perfect and complete?
Because it is eternal,
Okay, so it's eternal.
and that's our eternal occupation.
It's our eternal occupation.
And
Okay.
this knowledge gets destroyed at the time of death.
Okay, so my knowledge of nuclear physics will be destroyed at the time of death, and I'll have to relearn that. Okay.
Because that's what Krishna says.
Well, that's the best answer because what Krishna says, right? He says this is complete and perfect knowledge. But again, what is the goal of us? Why do we obtain knowledge? Why do you guys go to school?
To be successful.
To be successful.
To be happy finally.
To be happy finally. Right? What is success?
Happiness.
Happiness. So in our immediate term, we think we acquire some knowledge to understand, in essence, how to manipulate matter to generate wealth. Is that fair? Is that a fair summation of our academic process? How to manipulate matter to generate wealth. That's why we go to school. Okay? So, the goal of knowledge is to acquire something of value. Right? And ultimately, the reason we want some wealth is so that we can pursue some happiness. Anybody acquires knowledge to become miserable? No. Right? So we can determine that the value of knowledge is based on how much it can deliver, ultimately, happiness. So if I now go back to, if I know I'm the body, spirit, soul, and I know Krishna, how can I say now, understand that it's perfect and complete?
Because that gives eternal happiness.
Okay. So it's perfect because it gives eternal happiness. Nothing else can give. If I understand how to manipulate matter and I can make $1 billion, is that going to give me eternal happiness? What's the maximum happiness it can give me? 100 years? If you're lucky? And that, even that, it's not winning. We know there's so much trials and tribulations. But still, assuming it's all perfect and bliss, assuming it's perfection, I'll manage it better than anybody else. Okay, fine. Still, 100 years? 80 years? For you, those of you who are younger? That's it. Okay? So can we call that perfect knowledge? This is going to end. Now, how do I compare that to this knowing myself and the spirit soul and Krishna? What is the result of that? He said eternal bliss. 100 years or 200 years?
Forever.
Eternal. It never ends. And the quantity of bliss?
Unlimited.
So if that's a fact, that makes it perfect, right? But what makes it complete? What makes that complete? Okay, let's do it to the other way. What other knowledge can add something beyond what this knowledge gives? We'll answer this question by the negative. Can nuclear physics and having PhD level knowledge of nuclear physics help advance my result of knowing I am spirit soul within this body with a subordinate eternal relationship with Krishna? Can it give me more happiness? Add to my happiness from devotional life? How about math? How about having, knowledge of tomorrow's lottery numbers? How about knowing 16 different languages? Nothing can give what is already within these three pieces of knowledge. So now that is why Prabhupada describes it as perfect and complete. It's complete because there's nothing missing. All other knowledge has a relative relationship, but there's no real substance from it. So this is why then Prabhupada says one can go on to the supreme destination with this information. So this is the knowledge that Krishna has given in this chapter. And so Prabhupada then says in the next paragraph, how do we find this knowledge?
Help from a spiritual master.
What's that?
Direct help from a spiritual master.
Through a help from a spiritual master. Now, he makes an important adjective in the second paragraph that describes the type of person that should approach a spiritual master. What kind of person should approach a spiritual master?
Faithful person.
Faithful
Faithful person.
Faithful person. Because if I think this is a bunch of hogwash, okay, that's of course everyone's free will, but then there's no point to approach the spiritual master. Why not? Why is there no point? What happens if we approach the spiritual master without faith?
Cannot progress.
Will not accept anything that is being conveyed, right? But does that mean that we have to have complete faith before we can approach a spiritual master?
Little bit.
Because where does our faith come from?
From a pious activity.
From what?
From our pious activities.
From our pious activities, we develop some initial faith. But what continues to build our faith?
Association.
Association. What else? So association,
Knowledge.
knowledge, and one more.
Practicing.
Mercy.
Experience. Right? If I experience it, my faith increases. if I have some real convincing knowledge, my faith increases. Right? So the spiritual master must come. So when we say faithful person, it will basically entail one should go with an open mind, with a desire to know. One may have doubts. One should have doubts. How many doubts Arjuna has presented in his Bhagavad Gita? He's constantly asking questions. Right? So it's not that one should have blind faith. Yes, no, there will be questions to be answered. But one should approach that mood of inquiry in that I have these doubts, but I have faith in the Guru that you can extinguish those doubts. So when Prabhupada says a faithful person, don't mistake that to think, oh, I have to have full faith. Because full and fixed faith brings one to the top class category of devotional service. So it means one should be faithful in the spiritual master, knowing the truth and begging the Guru to guide me so that my faith will also solidify like the strong faith the spiritual master possesses. So is that clear what faithful means there? Okay. And what does the spiritual master do with the disciple? What's the reciprocation of our service to Guru? What does Guru give to us? Knowledge. And what kind of knowledge? Nuclear physics? Spiritual knowledge specifically to, Prabhupada says,
Free from the material concept of life.
I can say it again?
To get free from the material concept of life.
The Guru teaches one how to get free from the material concept of life. Any other Guru who offers any kind of other benediction, boon, we know is fully non-bona fide. A bona fide Guru teaches how to become free from the material concept of life. And why does a Guru teach that? Why is Krishna teaching Arjuna that?
To get eternal happiness.
To give Arjuna the best of all things, eternal happiness. And that exists in spiritual life. Right? So the process of approaching the spiritual master is most important. Then finally, Prabhupada in his final paragraph, speaks about the body and its 24 elements. Krishna described how the constitution of the body, the Kshetra, is made from the 5 gross elements, the 3 subtle elements, the mind, the different working senses, the sense objects, etc. Right? And then how this interacts with nature. Okay? And we already discussed about the soul and the super soul. So, in conclusion, what do we need to know to be able to be eligible to go to the spiritual world? We started with this and we'll end with this.
The distinction between body, owner of the body, and spirit.
That's it. Sounds so simple, no? To become liberated, moksha, free from the pangs of material existence. Body, soul, and super soul. And knowing their relationship. That brings about complete liberation, right? So, Prabhupada says these things are meant for contemplation and for
Practice. Practice.
Yeah, he said the word he uses is realization, which means practice, right? So we're already in the 13th chapter. We've heard body and soul from chapter 2. So the key again, realization. How to fully realize this. So Krishna will continue now describing the modes of material nature, this prakriti, in the next chapter. So the soul has come. We didn't really discuss the natures too much, but due to its desire to be the independent enjoyer, it has come to this material nature, and it has certain features that condition the soul, cover the soul, take it on a journey. And so Krishna will be discussing in the next chapter the 3 different modes of material nature and how they bind the living entity to this material world. And by knowing how it binds us, one can then know how to cut the binds. So that's chapter 13 and a little intro to 14. So, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Okay.
Any discussion, questions, comments?
Just was thinking, Prabhuji, that most of the verses all talk about this soul and super soul, the distinction, and that we are the relationship. Even after reading, why does sometimes the realization why does it not hit?
The false ego. Right? The false ego is still there, covering the soul, and so we still continue to perceive I am this body. So we take the knowledge I am not this body and use that to inspire our faith in the process to destroy and break down the false ego. Right? So we have more knowledge, realized knowledge that I'm not this body than we did a year ago. Otherwise, why we would practice spiritual life? And we have some faith. I'm not this body. But you're right, we don't see it, in every step of life. So, and where we know, as soon as there's any type of emotional setback, anytime we are frustrated, disappointed, anxiety, stress, fear, whatever it is 110% a function of bodily consciousness. So as soon as we experience those, we should diagnose, okay, I was so upset. Why? I forgot. I was eternal servant of Krishna. Okay? So by at least looking back and analyzing, and the next time we get that much closer to not, that being able to approach those situations with the vision that I am this body, I am spirit, so I'm not this body. Right? So we should contemplate the different activities that we take in a week, in a day, in a month, and say, okay, I was approaching this again through bodily consciousness. Why? I should remember. So we can use these symptoms, these emotions. When there's great, elation and joy beyond the joys of devotional service, we should also acknowledge that's still bodily consciousness. It's easier to, kind of analyze some of the distresses, so we tend to speak of that. But Krishna says, right, we should tolerate the hot and cold, the dualities, like the changing of seasons. So we should, diagnose when is it that I'm really thinking about myself as this body. And you might think, well, it's all the time. But that's not completely fair. And by continuing to chant, we will break this false ego. And when the false ego is gone, there'll be no more bodily consciousness.
Sometimes I feel, Prabhuji, that is more of a painful process sometimes. Painful process, because earlier when we did not know about it, go about ignorantly going about your life. But now with the consciousness is there, and purposely every time hitting your wall against it, and then again afterthought understanding, okay, did wrong. Before it was at least, even if I was hitting the wall, I did not realize it's happening. Now it's like really painful, because and only it comes as an afterthought. So how to kind of deal with this kind of and doesn't change.
Well, that's only one aspect of it, but you're experiencing the pleasures of devotional service.
Yeah, that's true.
Otherwise, why you would come? why you'd go to the temple and serve, why you'd participate in some festival, why you would sing some bhajans, why anything. Because you're experiencing more bliss than whatever activities we used to do on a Friday evening, Saturday evening, Sunday, whatever it might be. Right? There's some bliss, so we should relish those moments, enjoy those opportunities, those special morning Mangalarti darshans where we feel lost in the spiritual world, and meditate and hang on to those, and remember that we are tasting something much sweeter, because otherwise we there's a saying, grass is greener, right? We forget some of the trials and tribulations of our materially oriented life. They're very difficult. But to your point about, well, before I didn't know, so it was better, but is that really true? If you are, eating sweets and you have diabetes, would you rather know you have diabetes, or would you rather just keep eating sweets? You want to know. Why do you want to know?
It's not good for you, that's why.
It's not good for you. And then what is that knowledge going to do? Make you miserable?
Making more conscious of what you eat.
So that you can change to not die in that context, right? So if I'm in my material life and I don't know it's bad for me, but I'm digging myself a huge hole because I'm giving myself so much future suffering. So much future. I may not be aware of that future suffering, but it's there. So now that I have a little bit of pain because I have to recollect my past, bodily consciousness, that is minor in comparison to the amount of sinful reactions I was accumulating for myself through those activities. So ignorance is not bliss, because those are all coming, and by coming to have this knowledge, I have averted huge amounts of future suffering. So one is significantly enhanced in their position, right? Both by the experience of happiness and devotional service, as well as the reduction in all the different suffering one was going to endure through its material activities. So material ignorance is not bliss, because whether we know about it or not, those reactions are coming. Prabhupada says, whether a child knows fire is hot or not, when the hand goes in the fire, it's going to burn. Ignorance is not bliss, nor is it an excuse. So, have great faith and confidence. You have averted disaster, averted endless amounts of suffering. That's why Krishna says, Aham tom sarva papebhyo ma suchaha. Out of fear. But yes, along the way, there's a little bit of austerity, tapasya, required to get there. But that pales in comparison to the difficulties we are on the path to endure. It is nothing compared to that. So, enjoy the devotional life and be grateful. Wow, I've averted disaster, because that's the path we are headed until coming to Krishna consciousness. Okay? Yeah.
Sometimes austerity and tapasya, which you were saying, Prabhu, but looks like that is like in the bodily platform. How it is affects our impurities, which is subtle, Prabhu?
Well, austerities are of the body, they're of the mind and of speech, right? So Krishna will say that the austerities are, but with intelligence, one performs spiritual austerities. But if your austerities are in the mode of ignorance, then it's a material activity. right? But a spiritual austerity is a practice of devotional service. Just like when I go to the temple, I'm using my material body to render service. Right? So the material body is the vehicle by which I am rendering devotional service to Krishna. So similarly, the austerities I perform through the body or the mind, they are also a service to Krishna. Right? So I am out of like the austerity of fasting on Ekadashi. We just had Ekadashi this week, right? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very strongly emphasized the importance of Ekadashi. It is an opportunity to abstain from heavy maintenance of the body on that day. Why? So we can sleep more? No. So we can engage more in devotional service. More chanting, more reading. So as we minimize the needs of the body one day, we can increase the focus on service, devotional service. So that's an austerity by sacrificing some of our bodily needs for the purpose of rendering devotional service. We're not just fasting to fast. We're fasting for the purpose of being able to render devotional service. And that's why even in things like Ekadashi, you can get, sometimes too fanatical about it. We should take the level of austerity that allows us to minimize the needs of the body and increase devotional service. Some bodies are able to endure more levels of austerity. Great. Some are not. But if you put your body into complete misery through that austerity, you're not thinking of Krishna, you're thinking of your body. Right? So it defeats the purpose. So the austerity should be intelligently applied. Very intelligently applied. And remember the main goal of the austerity is to minimize the needs of the body, to maximize the opportunity for service. So the body is the vehicle by which we render all of our service. We engage our eyes, our tongue, our ears, our hands, legs, head. Ambrish Maharaj taught us.
So it's like more engaging the mind on Krishna.
Thinking of Krishna. Engaging the mind in Krishna and not on some nonsense is an austerity of the mind. Right? Speaking on Krishna and not some nonsense is an austerity of the speech.
And it leads to one more question, Prabhu. Like, for the simple activities, the living entities are punished in the head. So, even that looks like how the punishment can purify the soul, purify the living entity.
So two things. One, not all punishment is in hell. There's punishment now. Right? We're all being punished to some degree with COVID in different degrees. Right? So, but when there is need for large amounts of punishment, then one goes to the lower planets. So Yamaraj and his attendants are there to, because otherwise it might take forever to burn the karma and all the different life forms. So when one has committed so many excess sins, then one goes, as described in the 5th canto, to the lower planets where they're the recipients of various types of punishment. So that types of punishment doesn't purify in the sense it burns karma. So when we do activities that are separate from Krishna, any activity, good or bad, it goes into either my good account or my bad account. And I have a bucket of each. So all my bad activities result in bad actions, and all my good activities result in good actions. But as we know, they don't offset each other. So when I go, if I've done lots of bad, and I go and I'm suffering, I'm just emptying my bucket. So I'm reducing my account. And as I reduce my account further enough, I will elevate in the different life forms ultimately back to the human form of life. Because in the lower life forms, I'm not adding anything into my bucket. All I'm doing is taking out. Right? I'm burning karma. Because there's a dog, there's an ant, there's a tree. I don't create any new karma. The karma only applies to humans. So I'm burning. Once I get to the balanced position where I've now earned my opportunity to become in a human form of life, now what do? Based on that, new karma. Until I come to knowledge, right? So, but it's not purifying me until I come to knowledge of soul, super soul, and the body. That's what's going to purify. That's the purifying knowledge. And how is it purifying? Because it leads one to devotional service. And when one renders devotional service, one becomes purified of their sinful reactions. Antam sarva papibhyo.
Because this question arrived in the 5th canto with so much punishments are given. So I was wondering whether there is a purification happening or not. So I understand. There's no purification because sometimes when we give some kind of punishment to kids, for them to transform. So I was thinking Krishna's plan, Krishna's arrangement is also.
In one way you can say yes, because it just speeds up our path back to the human form of life, in which we can then hopefully take advantage of the knowledge in front of us. But the specific punishment itself doesn't lead to, it leads to burning consumption of our karma. Right? But remember, not all sinful reactions are generated or delivered in the lower planetary. So every day we encounter reactions from our past activities. Right? You're walking and you stub your toe. Why did you stub your toe? Don't yell at anybody else. It's your own fault. I must have done something previously, and thus I stubbed my toe. Happens. Sometimes the karma is instant, sometimes delayed, as we know. Sometimes it has to be given in so much quantity. We have to then take a life form that can withstand that amount of suffering. And that's hair-raising. When you read Fifth Canto, it's staggering. Because one is given a form that can even withstand that type of punishment. Right? Because in this form we know, if I were to receive that punishment, I just die. Thank God, I'll deal with it. Unfortunately, I don't have that opportunity. Because one is given a specific form that withstands that type of punishment.
Like for example, becoming a tree. You're standing there, thousands of years, helplessly.
Nothing you can
waiting for your karmas to be burnt up.
Nothing you can do, yeah. So, this is why we should take advantage of this knowledge and approach a bona fide spiritual master and practice devotional service. One can have a life of bliss and happiness. Anything else? Okay, so we chant. Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda.